All right, we are recording. Welcome to the weekly Sig Docs meeting for Kubernetes. It's the Sig Docs channel, all Sig Docs all the time. I'm a little punchy this week because 1.8 is a thing that's real. I suspect we are all a little punchy from 1.8. Do we have any new attendees today?
Yes, I'm new.
Welcome. Tell us your name.
My name's Chris Nagus. I work for Red Hat, and documenting. I've been documenting Docker, containers, Kubernetes, things like that for quite a while, and I'm here to see how I can help.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Thanks.
Do you know Ann Gentle?
I do not.
She works at Red Hat. She is a big OpenStack contributor. I worked with her at Rackspace. She's an excellent writer, excellent all-around person. If you get the chance to meet her, well worth the time.
Very good. I'll keep my eyes out.
Cool.
Thanks.
Any other new attendees?
Yeah, if you can hear me, if my sound is working.
Yes.
Excellent. Sorry, it's like 3:30 in the morning here, so I'm a little bit I'm a bit scattered at the moment. My name's Andrew, but I'll throw my video on for a sec. There we go. Andrew Burney, I also work at Red Hat, and my experience with this is working through OpenShift documentation. And like Chris, I'm working with Chris to kind of see how we can help out here.
Well, welcome, Andrew. Thank you for joining us at 3:30 in the morning.
This will be probably the only time I'll ever do this.
I'm actually going to be at Write the Docs in Melbourne, doing a Kubernetes doc sprint, November 24th. So you're more than welcome to join me. So,
but if I'm in Australia, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be there.
Sweet. All right. Good to hear.
It'll be good to meet you in person.
I know. You can see me in 3D.
Any other new attendees? All right, moving on. Let's go to our agenda. Let's see. Steve is in the burn down meeting, but I see him making a note that all PRs for feature docs are merged except for reference docs. So, yay. Happy times. Jennifer, would you like to give us an update on release notes for 1.8?
Well, Radhika and I are still wrangling last edits. We sort of deliberately left it to the end because so much content was coming in hot at the end. And we proposed new information architecture and abandoned that. At this point, our focus is on content and content only. So there's still some outstanding real content issues that I think we're successfully chasing down today, places where either we've got simply inadequate information or missing information. And we are at the same time trying to go through and just clean up some of the language for tightness, clarity, whatever. And we will have a lot to say in the retrospective.
Yes,
not pointing fingers, but just saying, okay, we can propose better and more automated processes going forward. There are also a lot of dependencies here. Because it's not really about, we can propose a release notes template, but until the whole process of defining what constitutes the release is clarified, there's not a whole lot more we can do except say, okay, here's a template, here's how we can automate scooping content in. But y'all have to get your issues and PRs stuff sorted before that's really useful.
That sounds like an excellent thing to bring to a retrospective. So,
I noticed that I just had a quick question. I noticed that when it comes to that one line that people are supposed to send in with each of their PRs of what to add to the release notes,
yep.
That people really didn't fill that out. How are you getting information about what goes in the release notes?
So what happened is for 1.7, people were using that line, and I think it was Don Chen who wrote a script to scoop that stuff in automatically. I am not quite sure why that approach was abandoned for 1.8, but it was. And there's a single markdown file in the release folder in the features repo where people have been manually adding content. Some folks have chosen simply to scoop out, copy paste the release note strings that they added to their PRs. That's a lot of the content that we need to chase down, though, because absent any other guidance, most of those single line strings are completely inadequate. So, well, maybe that might be a bit of hyperbole, but a lot of it is inadequate.
I'm just more curious about how you're getting the information now that the old process isn't being used.
Yeah. From the SIGs. Ad hoc. From the SIGs, chasing down SIGs, saying, put it in. We've been doing that for weeks. And there's at least one last minute chunk of content that I actually have identified this morning. So that's good. And I've got a meeting right after this one. I mean, I need to drop off at 11 to chase down a few more details about some stuff that could use a little more love. We're going to try to do a little more of that today. It's 11th hour. We'll do what we can. It'll be better than it's been. And for 1.9, it'll be still better. I do think that whether the larger group gets the overall issues and PRs stuff sorted for 1.9, that even providing a better template will help. It's not the whole solution, but folks who are being invited to write release note content need some better guidance about what to write.
Yeah, chasing down individual SIGs isn't working either. So chasing down the SIGs isn't working. Chasing down individuals does seem to work. Right.
Well, and that's what we've been doing. We've not been trying to. We started with SIGs. It's now at the individual level. Right.
Yeah, I have the same thing with Docs PR. So okay.
Exactly. There's no difference here, really. At a certain point, it's a matter of how to get the right content into the right place. And I think that's all I have to say about that right now.
Okay.
But yeah, good question. I was a little confused about them moving away from the automated process, but I didn't have enough information to even ask the right questions at that point. And I'm sure that's going to come up during the retro.
Yeah, I'm curious for the retro. I think it'll be good feedback for like Jace Dumars for like what went well, what can go better, specifically for the release notes process. So
yes.
I'm really looking forward to the retrospective and hearing what emerges and what can be better for like 1.9, 1.10.
Clear about, and this really affects how I contribute to a release notes discussion, is the way that issues versus PRs are managed for Kubernetes, because it doesn't map to any previous project experience that I've got. I'm accustomed to release note content belonging to an issue, not a PR. And PRs, all of them being clearly mapped to issues, referring back to there being a real virtuous cycle there. That doesn't seem to be how Kubernetes releases work.
It should be associated with a feature, not with an issue.
Yeah, so maybe that's.
I realize that's squishy too. Like that doesn't really like your critique still stands. It's still pretty mushy.
Okay, so it's just the label that I apply, right?
Right.
Well, and if there's
usually a feature in the feature repo and things still track against that instead of issues, which are more to track sort of, I don't know, issues, bugs, things like that.
But then individual PRs will point most often to issues, not to features.
Yep.
Okay, I'm glad I said something. I didn't want to take up too much of this meeting with this discussion, but this is really useful because it's helping me think about how to present to the retro. It's been murky for me for quite a while, and it's getting clearer. Clearer, please notice. Clarity is not.
So Jace opened up the retrospective doc already. So have you guys already put in your notes?
I haven't yet because I've been, well, A, worried more about the release content, and B, thrashing around with what to put, right? So y'all have just helped me at least clarify what I'd like to contribute to that document. So thank you very much. And obviously it's open. Anybody else can go in and say, well, what about this? So maybe I can toss additional questions in there. And if y'all want to take a look and like clarify things that I just don't know because I haven't had enough experience with release cycles, that would be awesome too.
Also, one last question. Was it a conscious decision for them to move away from the automated process, or was it just because nobody owned it or it just dropped through the cracks?
I don't know. I don't have any answer to that.
I thought that I remembered from the 1.7 retrospective that there was a specific reason for moving away from automation, that like feature developers had been using that field for information other than release notes, and basically the auto-generated results were not helpful or not useful. That it was scooping whatever people were putting in there, which is it's designed to do, but people weren't putting in good information. And so that's, I think, if I remember from 1.7, that was the decision driving, or that was the reasoning driving the decision to discontinue automation. But I mean, that's my faulty memory, and please.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, Zach. That maps to what little I remember of the discussion during the release meetings. That also suggests that maybe one approach we could discuss at the beginning of the 1.9 release is, not just a better template, but having the template not live in the PRs, because that seems to me unintuitive and it doesn't let things wrap up. And I realize people want details. And this, I at least, I mean, maybe others have this better figured out than I do. I need to think this through a bit better. Like I said, I'm still figuring out how to map my past experience wrangling this stuff to what's going on in Kubernetes and how much of it's useful and how much of it's irrelevant.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't think that there's a platonic. Go ahead.
Some historical context. I mean, one to your comment, I think it refers to PRs because we're tracking documentation as PRs that relate to each feature that then relate to each larger launch. So there's kind of like a tree where you have like 1.8s and then a set of features and then a set of PRs that relate to those features, and then all notes for each of those PRs, each of those features. It's not clear. Nobody's actually like sat down and documented that and said like this is how it is. Everybody's just kind of running around with that. Some mushy version of that model in their head. For the previous release, you're right. There was an engineer driving that effort to do a lot of automation around it, and it was scooping up a lot of content that then nobody was reviewing, and they were just kind of throwing it in their own notes. So it's. I think there is some space between automating things and then getting a human involved to make sure it makes sense. I'm open to what that process looks like.
At the very highest level, that's how I've always worked, right? So there's a requirement for something that looks reasonably like release note content produced by a dev or an architect or a PM somewhere in an issue or a feature or a whatever sort of planning at the beginning of a release item. And then that stuff is automatically scooped out and then curated by a human. When I started looking at the release notes, things were sparse enough that I fully expected that I was going to be chasing. Well, I didn't expect, but I flagged the fact that things looked sparse enough that I didn't think we had sufficient writer resources to go code diving after the details of PRs, but it looked like we might have to do that.
Yeah. I mean, at Google, we do release notes entirely human driven, but the process is very clear to everybody of like, you're releasing this feature, we work on the content, and then there's a release note that goes out. And
yeah. But the other thing that Kubernetes...
We don't have either right now. We don't have a process, nor do we have...
I think we could, if we set expectations for 1.9 early about how release note content is generated, who produces it, who reviews it, if we set expectations for process, I think that will produce a better result in the end.
Yeah, and clarify the role. I mean, this is 1.8 is the first release where there've been raters worrying about the release notes. I mean, there's been a docs person who's had to shepherd all the content, and that's just been too much. And with any dedicated writer resource to the release notes as opposed to the documentation, I mean, piggybacking on the issue that you created whenever it was that yesterday about docs, PRs, and process, you're basically talking about something similar for release notes. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, just to be, I think when you go into the like, post-mortem, it's important to go in with a set of suggestions like, hey, here's all the problems I saw, and here are my suggested improvements. And just because I wouldn't, like, the engineers have already given up on doing this. That's why they handed it off to us. So like, this is hard. We don't know what we're doing. It's probably not like it's that you're nodding emphatically. So like,
Agreed. That's why this is helpful, because it's helping me understand what current practices are like or aren't like. And that lets me brainstorm solutions. What I think I'll try to do then is start writing something up, share it with the group. Just write it up separately. Not worry about putting it in the retro notes yet. Write it up separately, share it with y'all. Maybe we can put it on the agenda for next week, because the retro won't be until next Thursday's community meeting. So that'll give us time to look at, whatever. And Jared and Zach in particular, I'll be pinging you to provide feedback or even come up with stuff. Zach, it sounds like you've got some pretty decent ideas in your back pocket, so I will try to filch them out.
Excellent. Yeah, let's, if we can, I think Jared's right, if we can go into the retrospective with a suggestion for action, saying, hey, this is what we observed, this is how this could be better with these specific actions. I think going into the retro with a plan of action is the best way to approach that. And just workshopping that in the week leading up to the retrospective.
Yeah, exactly. And really what I've been doing with y'all here is just trying to understand how we got to where we are now, right? So for me, that helps figure out where we can go next.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks.
So moving on to feature docs, like as mentioned earlier, Steve is in the burn down meeting, but he has left notes about the...
Actually, he just joined us.
Oh,
yeah, I'm here.
Perfect. Steve, I noticed that you have put in notes about the feature docs. Is there anything that you want to add or elaborate on about where feature docs are at for 1.8?
Just what's there, and that is that the only thing left is reference docs, and they seem to be on track.
Excellent. Is there any like would people help that go faster?
I don't think so. I think it's just a matter of people running the scripts to auto-generate them.
Okay. All right, moving on. We have two new maintainers for the repo. I make no claim to being able to pronounce Mandarin well. So Tim Cheng and Peter Zhao, they have joined us from the Chinese translation team. We'll be mostly working to review Chinese translation PRs. They may drop in and do like technical review and help with some English PRs, but mostly their efforts will be concentrated on Chinese translation PRs.
Hooray.
And that should reduce the load on us to deal with those.
Yes. Happy day. All right. I see that we have an agenda item from Luke for documentation of cloud providers config.
Yeah, I was searching around and I just wanted to know if there's any current efforts I wasn't able to find on any open issues, but efforts for documenting cloud provider config, specifically the OpenStack. There's been quite a few questions around the sender configuration, things like that within cloud provider, and I don't see anything that's documented currently in that area for any of the cloud providers. Do we have any progress there, or am I looking in the wrong place, or what's the best way to start that effort?
I would say that the best way to start the effort is to open issues and start submitting PRs against it.
Okay. Do we have a specific way of currently documenting that I'm missing? Currently documenting the cloud provider config for each of those providers?
So would this be a specific, like, if you want to use Kubernetes on OpenStack, here's all the config work that you need to do to work on it? Is that what you mean?
The format of the cloud config itself for each of the cloud providers and the options that can be passed for those cloud providers is the item in the OpenStack SIG that recently was asked. And it seems to be usually a link to an external blog or tutorial somewhere out in the ether and not within the Kubernetes documentation itself that's easily linked. So kind of like configure authentication to OpenStack, for example.
Right. Is this OpenStack specific, or is this general to Kubernetes? I guess that's what I'm asking.
It would be general to Kubernetes. I assume that there's other cloud config that you need to pass for AWS or for GCE or for maybe DigitalOcean or the other cloud providers that are out there, but I don't see any documentation for any of those to know whether or not that configuration is required at all.
So, yeah, I mean, one second. It does seem like there's some for AWS under concepts. But even looking at that doc, I'm not sure if that's actually. It's like cloud providers, and then AWS is the only cloud provider listed on the page.
Yeah. Oh, I missed that one. I don't know why it didn't come up in the search at the top there. That's odd. But
there we go. I don't know if that's sort of what you had in mind.
Yes, that might be a good. Is that an acceptable place to then file issues and PRs against for more cloud provider documentation, or?
Yeah, I don't think so, because this doc is entirely for Amazon Web Services.
Right, it would have to be some. We would have to turn this into.
Happen to run on other services, such as OpenStack.
Well, so I guess adding an OpenStack section to that. I mean, it looks like there's a beginning of a. You'll see at the top.
Hey, Andrew. Andrew, were you the last one to touch this? This is part of your concepts review. Or concepts docs. I could dig through the history on this doc and figure that out, but
yeah, because I don't remember offhand.
And who knows?
It seems like, so where I may have got it wrong, I don't know if this is a future conversation or whatever, but it seems like that should be in that kind of information should be in setup in the configuration setting under setup and not under concepts.
Yep. This was added by some person who's not here. Luis Pabon. And approved by Steve. Maybe? Yeah. Wait. Huh. Anyway. This is probably not how we want to document this. This doesn't look like it was. Yeah, I think you're right. What we want is this content under setup. I worry about having specific, like, here's how you set up OpenStack using Kubernetes on the Kubernetes docs, because OpenStack can change and we don't actively track that.
But I guess it's not necessarily OpenStack; it's the cloud provider itself, right? So the changes this would be, well, first in Gopher Cloud and then trickled up to the cloud provider. Is there any talk about when, as the cloud providers are pulled out of the main repo, how we would still document those cloud provider configuration of those cloud providers within the Kubernetes documentation, or is that expected to be maintained internal to for each cloud provider itself?
This is a big question we've been discussing on and off for the last year and a half. And our tendency is to think that we won't have the time or the knowledge to maintain those docs and keep them up to date as part of the Kubernetes core documentation, so that we would probably rather have links to external documentation that's maintained by the people who have the expertise in those different areas. But it's still an open discussion, so that's the state of it right now. The answer to your question is we've talked about this a lot, but we really don't have a firm plan.
Yeah, so I guess I was the one that merged that, unfortunately. But yeah, we should probably move it out of the concept section.
Okay, I will make notes and take a stab at it then, for at least the direct questions that, yeah, for the realm I know, and then maybe put some, at the very least, some placeholders for. I'll figure it out, but I'll take a stab at it and see what you guys think.
That sounds reasonable. I would prepare for a lot of discussion around it that is pertinent to the material itself, but also the question of like, what are we going to do with this in the larger sense? So I expect it will be a discussion-heavy PR.
Okay. Is that an acceptable thing, or should I do a proposal for that, and where the moves? Just talk about it an issue before I start doing a PR.
I mean, that seems that would be GitHub best practices, is to confine all like discussion about the general issue to the issue, and then like implementation specific questions to a PR. So yeah, I would say open an issue. It's like hash it out in the issue, and then like do specific implementations in PRs. Okay.
Yeah, and the OpenStack SIG also, I'll make sure I CC them, because I'm sure they'll have comments there about the best way to keep things updated too, since that just kind of came out some repeated questions. I think, once a week there's a new question about how do I configure like Cinder authentication, etc. So I think since it's on their minds, it's not a bad thing to get input from them now. Will do.
Cool. Thank you. Right. We had a presentation scheduled today from Radhika about working in open source projects. Radhika has needed to reschedule again. We don't have a current date for a reschedule. We'll have to work that out in the future. So for now, unless anyone has anything else for the meeting today, going once, going twice. All right, sold. That's a Sig Docs meeting.
All right, everyone. Thanks a lot, folks.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.